You have less time than you think. Not in the anxious, urgent way that phrase usually lands, but in the way that matters when a window is genuinely closing. 48 hours from now, the Pisces new moon will have arrived, the lunar cycle will have turned, and whatever the current period has been trying to return to you, surface in you, complete in you, that offering will be transformed. The intensity of this window will shift. The particular quality of access you currently have to your own interior life, to the unresolved things that have been pressing for your attention throughout this Mercury retrograde, to the emotional depth that the approaching Pisces new moon has been building for days. All of that will change in quality and character once March 19th arrives. You are inside the final hours of something. And the question worth sitting with right now, not later, not after you finish whatever else you're managing today, is whether you have been paying attention to what those hours have been carrying. Because the final 48 hours before a Pisces new moon, during an active Mercury retrograde, are not ordinary time. They are time with a very specific function, a very specific pressure, and a very specific kind of signal running through them. And those signals, if you've been noticing them and wondering what they mean, or if you've been experiencing them without quite connecting them to anything larger, deserve your full attention right now. Before the window closes, before the signal changes, there is a specific quality that the final 2 days before a new moon carry that is unlike any other point in the lunar cycle. The moon has been waning for 2 weeks, each night darker than the last. The light has been slowly, incrementally withdrawing, and with it, something in the psyche has been withdrawing too. The external orientation that usually governs most of daily life, the preoccupation with doing and planning and moving forward, begins to thin in these final days. The attention wants to turn inward. The energetic current of the cycle is pulling, very gently but very insistently, toward completion, toward the exhale before the next breath begins. In any month, these final balsamic days carry a natural invitation to slow down, reflect, and release whatever the cycle has been carrying. But in a month where the new moon falls in Pisces, the depth of that invitation reaches somewhere that most lunar cycles don't touch. And in a month where Mercury is still retrograde as that invitation arrives, where the planet governing thought and communication and the movement of information has been running backward through the sky, returning things that were left behind, reopening things that were closed before they were finished, the combination creates something that is genuinely unusual in how it functions. The retrograde has been the excavator. For weeks, it has been doing the work of unearthing what was buried, returning what was passed too quickly, insisting on the relevance of things that the forward momentum of your life had made it convenient to treat as finished. And now, in the final 48 hours before the new moon that will reset the cycle, the excavation is reaching its final stage. Whatever the retrograde has been trying to surface, whatever it has been insistently returning to your awareness throughout this period, is right now at the closest point to the surface it is going to reach before the cycle turns. Which means the signals arriving in these final hours are not the beginning of something. They are the culmination of something. They are the last transmission of a message that has been building for weeks. The first signal that tends to intensify in these final hours is the one that arrives as an unexpected clarity. A moment, often striking in its suddenness, where something you have been confused about for a long time simply becomes clear. Where the fog lifts, briefly but completely, and you can see the shape of something that has been obscured. This clarity doesn't always arrive in a form you'd expect. It rarely arrives as a logical conclusion you've reasoned your way toward. It tends to arrive sideways, in the middle of a mundane task, in the moment between sleep and waking, in a conversation about something entirely unrelated where a single sentence from another person lands with such precision that something inside you goes quiet and still. And in that stillness you recognize something, not as new information exactly, but as confirmed information. The kind of understanding that the mind has been assembling, piece by piece, throughout the entire retrograde period, and that now, with the new moon hours away and the balsamic energy at its deepest, suddenly completes itself. If this clarity arrives for you in these final hours, the worst thing you can do is dismiss it as a passing thought, file it away for later consideration, or talk yourself out of it before it has fully landed. The particular kind of knowing that emerges at the threshold of a Pisces new moon is not the product of analysis. It bypasses analysis. It comes from somewhere deeper, from the accumulated emotional intelligence of everything you've been moving through, distilled into a single moment of genuine recognition. What this clarity tends to reveal is something about a relationship, a direction, a version of yourself, or a situation in your life where you have been sustaining a confusion that was actually, at some level, chosen. Where not knowing was more comfortable than knowing, because knowing demanded a response you weren't sure you were ready to make. The final hours before the Pisces new moon have a way of making the chosen confusion no longer tenable. The energy of completion that is moving through this period is too strong, and the emotional depth of Pisces too dissolving of comfortable pretenses, for the artificial uncertainty to hold. When the clarity arrives, receive it. Don't rush to act on it. Action can come later, and the new moon's energy will support clearer action than this final balsamic period will. But receive the clarity itself. Let it be real. Let it complete its transmission. Because this is the signal the entire retrograde period has been building toward delivering, and letting it land is the work of these final hours. The second signal that tends to arrive in the final 48 hours is more emotional in nature and often more difficult to sit with. It is the feeling that has been traveling just beneath the surface of your daily life throughout this entire retrograde period, the one you've been managing at a slight distance, the one that surfaces in quiet moments and then gets filed away when the next demand arrives, and it is, in these final hours, refusing to be managed anymore. Something will arrive in you that feels like more than you planned for, a sadness with unexpected depth, a longing that you can no longer plausibly pretend is about something small, a love for a person, for a version of your life, for a version of yourself, that you thought you had adequately processed, but that is demonstrating quite clearly that processing and releasing are not the same thing. A grief that has been patient for a very long time and is now, as the cycle nears its completion, finally asking for the full space it was never quite given. This kind of emotional arrival in the final days before a new moon is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It is not a regression or a setback. It is the cycle doing exactly what it is designed to do, completing, bringing to the surface what needs to be genuinely felt and genuinely released before the new beginning arrives. And the Pisces new moon, more than any other, specializes in this particular kind of completion, because Pisces carries everything that has gone unprocessed, and the new moon in Pisces offers a release for it that is, when received fully, genuinely transformative. The wisdom available in these final hours, if this kind of feeling arrives for you, is to resist the instinct to manage it back down, to give it space, even briefly, even imperfectly, to let yourself feel the actual size of it rather than the manageable version. Not to wallow, that's a different thing, and the energy of these final hours is too completing oriented to support wallowing anyway. But to feel it fully enough that something genuinely releases, that the cycle ends having been met honestly rather than managed successfully. What releases in a genuine emotional completion is not just the specific feeling. What releases is the energy that has been consumed in managing it. And that energy, which has been quietly, consistently diverted from your aliveness and creativity and presence, returns to you on the other side of the feeling. That is the gift hidden inside the emotional intensity of these final hours. The feeling is not the obstacle. It is the doorway. The third signal running through these final 48 hours is the one most directly generated by Mercury retrograde, and it is the one most likely to arrive in an external rather than internal form. It is the last-minute appearance, the person who reaches out, the conversation that reopens, the situation that resurfaces, the piece of information that arrives, that seems to come from nowhere but lands with the unmistakable weight of something that was always going to arrive here. The final delivery of the retrograde. the last thing it was trying to return to you before it stations direct. These last-minute appearances in the hours before a Pisces new moon have a particular characteristic that distinguishes them from other retrograde returns. They tend to be the most essential ones, not the first wave of retrograde material, which often returns the things closest to the surface, the relatively recent, the relatively expected. The last wave tends to reach something older, something that has been more deeply buried, something whose return requires the accumulated emotional softening of the entire retrograde period before it can make its way back to you in a form you can actually receive. You may feel, when this last-minute appearance arrives, that you have been brought back to a moment you thought was very far behind you, that a door you were certain was permanently closed has opened, not dramatically, not with announcement, but with the quiet inevitability of something that has been working toward this opening for a long time. And you may feel, alongside the disorientation of that, a strange recognition, as if some part of you, the part that has been doing the deeper processing throughout this entire period, already knew this was coming, already prepared for it, without informing the rest of you. The question this last-minute appearance is asking is one that requires your full presence to answer, not your habitual response, the one you've given to versions of this situation before, not your protective response, the one that manages the potential pain at the expense of the potential truth. Your actual, considered, present-moment response to what is arriving right now, with everything you have learned and processed and honestly examined throughout this retrograde period informing it. Because this is the retrograde's final examination. And what it is examining, gently, without judgment, but with the kind of precision that this period specializes in, is whether you have actually been changed by the work of these past weeks. Whether the excavation and the surfacing and the returning and the honest looking have produced something genuinely new in you. Whether you are arriving at this new moon as the same version of yourself who entered the retrograde, or as someone who has learned something true about themselves that they didn't fully know before. There is something specific happening in the hours surrounding the final day before a Pisces new moon that doesn't get talked about enough, and it is the reason why these particular hours deserve the quality of attention you might not realize they're asking for. The veil and Pisces energy makes this a felt reality rather than a metaphor. Between your conscious awareness and your deeper knowing becomes genuinely, unusually thin. The ordinary distance between what you think and what you feel, between what you know intellectually and what you know in the body, between who you present as and who you actually are, all of that distance contracts. In practical terms, this means that the intuitive information available to you in these final hours is extraordinarily high quality. Impressions that arrive will arrive with unusual accuracy. The sense you get about a person or a situation in these final hours will be less filtered through your preferences and hopes and fears than at almost any other point in the cycle. Your ability to perceive what is actually true, as distinct from what you want to be true or are afraid might be true, is at a kind of peak. And because Mercury retrograde has been running its returning motion simultaneously, what you will perceive with this elevated clarity is precisely the material the retrograde has been working to surface. The combination means that the intuitive hits arriving in these final 48 hours are likely to be the most precise and the most important of the entire period. They are the distillation of everything the retrograde has been trying to tell you, arriving now through the channel of your own deep knowing, delivered with the particular clarity that only the threshold of a Pisces new moon can provide. Pay attention to what you sense rather than what you think in these hours. Pay attention to the impressions that arrive in the moments of stillness, before the day's momentum builds, in the pauses between tasks, in the space between one thought and the next. Pay attention to the feeling you have when you think of certain people, certain situations, certain possibilities for your life. Not the analyzed feeling, not the feeling you've decided you should have, the actual, immediate, pre-verbal response that arrives before the editing begins. That pre-verbal response is the signal. It is the truest information these final hours are carrying for you. And it is available right now, in a form that will not be available in quite the same way once the new moon passes and the new cycle begins. Here is the thing about the final 48 hours before a new moon that only becomes visible from a certain angle. Everyone enters a new beginning. The calendar turns, the lunar cycle resets, the new phase begins, and everyone enters it simply by virtue of time passing. There is no version where you skip the new moon and continue in the old cycle. The reset happens regardless. The only difference that matters, is what you bring into it. And the final 48 hours before the new moon are the last window in which you have the option to choose, deliberately, what you carry forward and what you leave behind. After the new moon, the energy shifts toward expansion and new direction. The contracting, completing, releasing energy of the balsamic phase gives way to the impulse of new beginning. And whatever remains unacknowledged, unresolved, uncleaned in you when that shift happens travels forward into the new cycle, intact. Most people are not aware that they are making this choice. Most people experience the final hours before a new moon as simply the day before something begins, a neutral passage of time that will be replaced by the more significant moment of the beginning itself. And so they move through those final hours as they move through most hours, with their attention distributed across all the demands and distractions and forward-facing preoccupations of ordinary life. And then the new moon arrives, and they begin. And the beginning carries the weight of everything they didn't clear, because the opportunity to clear it passed in those final hours while their attention was elsewhere. You are here, which means your attention is not elsewhere. You are in these final hours with an awareness of what they are and what they are offering that most people simply don't have. And that awareness is the difference between experiencing this new moon as something that happens to you and experiencing it as something you actively, intentionally step into. The signals arriving in these final hours, the unexpected clarity, the feeling that wants its full space, the last-minute return, the heightened intuition, are all pointing toward the same territory. They are all asking you to be fully present to what is being completed, so that the completion is genuine and the new beginning that follows can be, in whatever measure the Pisces new moon makes possible, truly new. In the hours remaining before March 19th, with Mercury retrograde delivering its final returns and the balsamic lunar darkness at its deepest, there is a practice available to you that requires nothing but your honest attention. It is simply this: notice what keeps finding you, not what you are looking for. What keeps finding you? The thought that returns uninvited. The feeling that resurfaces despite your best efforts to keep the day moving. The name or the face or the chapter of your life that keeps drifting to the surface of your awareness without any apparent external trigger. The sense you have, perhaps you've been having it for days, perhaps it is arriving fresh right now, that something is on the verge of becoming clear. That you are almost at the understanding you've been circling throughout this entire retrograde. That the thing you've been working toward receiving is just on the other side of one final moment of honest looking. What keeps finding you in these final hours is the retrograde's last gift. The final thing it identified as needing your attention before the cycle turns. And the Pisces new moon, arriving in hours, is the most powerful possible container for receiving it. For letting it complete, for allowing the cycle to end having actually been met, rather than having been managed through. The signals of these final 48 hours are real. They are not anxiety or oversensitivity or the product of knowing too much about astrology. They are the felt reality of a genuinely unusual convergence of energies. The retrograde completing, the Pisces new moon arriving, the balsamic darkness at its deepest, that together create a quality of time unlike most of the time you will live through this year. Use it, not productively, in the ordinary sense of that word. Use it presently. Use it honestly. Use it by turning your attention, even briefly, even imperfectly, toward the signal that has been most insistently finding you throughout this period, and letting it finally complete its transmission. The new moon arrives on March 19th. Mercury stations direct around March 20th. The intensity of this window, The excavation and the depth and the unusual thinning of the ordinary distance between your surface and your truth will shift when those moments pass. But what you receive in these final hours, if you are present enough to receive it, belongs to you permanently. The clarity that comes through honest feeling doesn't arrive once the lunar cycle turns. The thing you finally let yourself know, in the deep honesty of the final balsamic hours, doesn't unknown itself when the new light returns. The signal, fully received, becomes part of you, part of the version of you that steps into the new cycle, carrying something it didn't have before. Not a burden, not a weight, something more like a compass reading. A precise, honest sense of where you actually are, emotionally, relationally, in terms of the life you are building and the truths you are willing to live by, that will orient every step of the new cycle with a clarity that incomplete beginnings simply cannot provide. The final hours are here. The signals are arriving. The window is open. Be present to what finds you in these last hours before the darkness turns to light. What arrives in you now, quietly, precisely, with the patience of something that has been waiting for exactly this moment to be finally fully heard, is the most important thing this entire period has been trying to give you. Receive it before the new moon arrives, while there is still time.